Modern Manhattan feels unstoppable, a place where glass towers slice into the clouds and neon lights bounce off steel at every hour of the day. Walk through Midtown, and the noise of taxis, crowds, and construction blends into a constant hum that never truly fades. From Central Park, the skyline rises like a jagged wall of silver, shimmering in the afternoon sun and glowing fiercely at night. Everything about the city looks permanent, as if it has always been this way, a monument to ambition and modern power. But hidden beneath this futuristic surface is a forgotten world that once defined the island long before steel claimed the horizon. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, Manhattan was not a canyon of skyscrapers. It was a corridor of palaces. Along Fifth Avenue, enormous stone mansions stretched for blocks, each one built by families whose names still echo through history, families who shaped industries, politics, culture, and the very identity of America. These were not houses meant for comfort alone. They were symbols of dominance. Rival monuments crafted from marble, carved limestone, and imported art. Their builders measured wealth not in numbers on a bank ledger, but in rooms. Ballrooms, galleries, and ceilings painted like the halls of European royalty. Stand on those same streets today and you would never guess what once stood there. The towers of Midtown hide every trace of the past, and the noise of the city drowns out the memory of carriage wheels and ballroom music. Yet if you pause long enough, if you look past the glass and steel, you begin to imagine the world that came before. A time when America was still young and its richest. Families competed to build castles that could outshine even the palaces of Europe. Before skyscrapers ruled the sky, castles once ruled Manhattan, and their stories still linger beneath the city's relentless pulse dot in the late 19th century. The United States was changing faster than anyone could have predicted. Railroads stitched the country together, factories roared with new machines, and fortunes were being made overnight in steel, oil, mining, and banking. This explosive growth created a new class of wealthy families whose money rivaled and often surpassed the riches of European nobility. As their businesses expanded, so did their ambitions. They wanted to be seen, respected, and remembered, and nowhere offered a better stage than Manhattan. At that time, Fifth Avenue was still mostly lined with modest brownstones and quiet carriage routes, a peaceful stretch far removed from the chaos of downtown. But as the Gilded Age rose, this quiet avenue transformed into the epicenter of American luxury. Families like the Vanderbilts, the Astors, the Rockefellers, and the Carnegies sought to outdo one another with homes that were less like residencies and more like monuments to themselves. Architects were summoned from Europe, materials imported from quarries half a world away, and armies of craftsmen were hired to carve, paint, and design every square inch of these massive structures. The competition was fierce. One mansion needed to be larger, taller, grander, or more extravagant than the last. Inside these palaces, ballrooms shimmered with crystal chandeliers. Music rooms echoed with orchestras, and banquet halls stretched long enough to seat dozens of guests in a single row. A single evening's dinner could cost more than an average worker earned in an entire year. Servants moved through hidden corridors. Carriages lined up outside like a parade of wealth. This era was dazzling, intoxicating, and deeply unequal. While these barons of industry built their own kingdoms, workers across the country lived in crowded tenements and struggled to afford basic necessities. Yet the elite saw these palaces as proof of their success, their place in a rapidly expanding nation. From the outside, these mansions looked indestructible, carved from stone meant to last for centuries. But history moves in cycles, and what rises fast can fall even faster. The same avenue that once displayed the height of American wealth would, within a few decades, erase almost every trace of this golden age. For a brief moment, however, Fifth Avenue was America's royal highway, lined not with glass towers but with castles, built by the people who shaped the modern world. Once the race for architectural dominance began, Manhattan entered a period unlike anything seen before. The wealthy no longer built homes simply to live in them. They built statements, physical declarations of status designed to tower over their rivals. Along Fifth Avenue, limestone walls rose like cliffs. Copper roofs shimmered under the sun, and carved stone faces watched silently from grand facades. These were not private residences in the typical sense. They were emblems of power that announced to the world just how far a family had climbed. Each mansion became a chess move in a much larger game of social hierarchy. The Vanderbilts answered criticism of being new money by constructing palaces fit for royalty. The Astors fought to preserve their dominance by expanding and refining their mansions into artistic showcases. Others followed, determined to outshine both the old guard and the rising titans of industry. Inside these homes, no detail was considered too small or too expensive. Marble was imported from Italy, tapestries commissioned from French workshops, and entire ceiling murals painted by European masters. Ballrooms were large enough to host hundreds, dining rooms lined with gold trim, libraries filled with rare books, and servants' quarters arranged with military precision. Each evening became a carefully orchestrated display of elegance. Carriages pulled up in long lines, gowns glittered beneath crystal chandeliers, and orchestras filled the air with music that drifted through open windows into the city streets. This was the Gilded Age at full shine, breathtaking and overwhelming, built on both creativity and competition. But behind the polished surfaces lay a different reality. These palaces were fragile symbols, dependent on fortunes that could shift with economic downturns, political changes, or personal missteps. Their beauty masked the fact that the world outside was evolving, and the era that allowed such extravagance could not last forever. Still, for a remarkable moment in history, Manhattan became a playground of stone castles, each one trying to outdo the next. Each one leaving behind a story that would echo long after its walls were gone. The Tiffany dynasty, a mansion where luxury and art lived under one roof. The story of Manhattan's lost palaces cannot be told without stepping into the world of the Tiffanys, a family whose name still sparkles in jewelry stores across the globe. In the early 1880s, Charles Louis Tiffany, the visionary behind Tiffany and Company, set out to build a home that would reflect not only immense wealth but an unwavering commitment to refinement and creativity. His mansion on Madison Avenue soared above the surrounding brownstones, a limestone landmark with elegant lines that hinted at the masterwork inside. What truly set the Tiffany mansion apart, however, was the collaboration between Charles and his son, Louis Comfort Tiffany, an artist whose imagination shaped some of the most iconic pieces of American decorative art. Louis was not interested in merely decorating rooms. He wanted to transform light itself into a living, breathing presence within the home. To do this, he designed an enormous multi-level studio at the top of the mansion, a place where stained glass windows shimmered with color even on cloudy days. Large arched windows brought sunlight pouring in, catching on fragments of glass, pieces of pottery, and half-formed lampshades that sat drying on wooden tables. Visitors who walked into Louis' studio often felt as if they had stepped into an artist's cathedral, where creativity echoed off every surface. Throughout the house, the Tiffany's blended luxury with craftsmanship. Parlors were dressed in warm woods and golden accents. Dining rooms featured long, polished tables ready for elaborate gatherings, and quiet sitting rooms offered cozy retreats for the family. Yet there was also a sense of experimentation, as if each hallway invited a new artistic idea. Louis brought nature into his designs, capturing the soft glow of a sunset, the delicate curve of a flower petal, and the iridescence of a dragonfly's wings in his stained glass creations. The mansion became a living gallery, one where art and architecture coexisted in perfect harmony. But as dazzling as it was, the Tiffany mansion also foreshadowed the fragility of the era. It embodied the height of Gilded Age ambition, built on fortunes that could soar but also crumble. Though the mansion eventually vanished from Manhattan's changing landscape, the legacy of its beauty survives in every Tiffany lamp glowing softly in a museum or cherished home, each one carrying a piece of the magic that once lived behind its walls. Louis Comfort Tiffany's Tower of Light, where imagination burned brighter than wealth, high above the elegance of the Tiffany mansion. Beyond the parlors and dining rooms where guests admired polished silver and soft candlelight, stood the space that defined the home more than any other. It was the tower studio of Louis Comfort Tiffany, a soaring three-story sanctuary where creativity ruled every corner. While the rest of Manhattan buzzed with the noise of horse carriages and street vendors, this studio glowed with a different kind of energy. Light entered through towering windows and scattered across shards of colored glass that covered the work tables. Golds, blues, greens, and ruby reds flickered like jewels as the sun shifted throughout the day. Heat from the furnaces rolled across the room where molten glass was shaped, stretched, and coaxed into patterns inspired by nature. This was the birthplace of the famous Tiffany stained glass, the shimmering work that would one day become a symbol of American artistry. Louis worked with an intensity that startled those around him. Assistants moved quickly, arranging materials, stoking fires, and bringing in sketches. Everywhere you looked, there were signs of ideas in motion. Panels depicting winding vines, lampshades blooming like flowers, and experimental glass pieces that looked almost alive. Louis believed that light itself was a kind of art and that a home should not only display beauty but generate it. The mansion became his canvas, and the studio was the beating heart that powered its imagination. Visitors privileged enough to climb the winding staircase to the tower often found themselves speechless. The space felt charged, as if inspiration hung in the air waiting to be caught. At night, the glow from the studio spilled out onto the street, giving the building an almost mystical aura. Passers-by could see flashes of color dancing across the windows, unaware they were witnessing the creation of pieces that would one day sit in museums. It was a world within a world, a sanctuary where wealth took a back seat to artistry. Yet, even this remarkable tower could not protect the mansion from the forces of time. The Gilded Age was shifting, the economy tightening, and the new century had little patience for colossal homes burned by enormous upkeep. Still, Louis' studio remains one of the most captivating chapters of Manhattan's lost palaces. A reminder that in an age obsessed with grandeur, the greatest marvels were sometimes made of glass and light. The fall of the Tiffany mansion. When the Gilded Age lost its shine, for decades the Tiffany mansion stood as a symbol of refinement, a place where luxury and imagination intertwined under one roof. But as the 20th century moved forward, the world around it began to shift. The glitter of the Gilded Age dimmed as economic storms gathered and public sentiment changed. Wealth that once seemed endless suddenly felt fragile, and enormous homes built for grand living became burdens rather than triumphs. After Louis Comfort Tiffany passed away in 1933, the mansion entered a period of uncertainty. The nation was deep in the Great Depression, a moment when extravagant houses looked out of place amid breadlines and unemployment. Maintaining a residence with dozens of rooms, towering windows, and custom interiors became nearly impossible. Even families who once threw lavish parties now struggled to justify such spaces when the world demanded practicality and restraint. The Tiffany family made the difficult decision to sell the mansion, and within only a few years its fate was sealed. In 1936, the once magnificent home was demolished. The limestone facade that had shimmered in the sun, the carved staircases that echoed with footsteps, and the soaring studio where brilliant colors danced through stained glass all disappeared into rubble. In their place rose a plain apartment building, boxy and efficient, mirroring a city moving toward modernity and away from ornamental excess. New Yorkers who passed the site hardly recognized what had been lost. This was the quiet end of an era in which architecture had served as a declaration of identity. The fall of the Tiffany mansion was not just the loss of a building. It symbolized the fading of the dream that wealth could build timeless legacies from stone and glass. And yet something survived. The spirit of Louis Comfort Tiffany lived on through his creations. Each time someone admired a glowing Tiffany lamp or a stained glass window illuminated in a museum, they touched a fragment of the world that once existed inside that mansion. In this way, the home's legacy outlasted its walls. Though its physical presence vanished from the Manhattan skyline, its artistic influence continued to shine. A last spark from a palace that helped define the brilliance of the Gilded Age. Otto Kahn's surviving palace, a mansion that refused to vanish. While many Gilded Age homes disappeared beneath the rise of modern Manhattan, one structure managed to defy the city's relentless transformation. On Fifth Avenue near Central Park stands the Otto Kahn Mansion, a limestone masterpiece that looks as though it was transported straight from Renaissance Italy. Its arched windows, carved details, and grand proportions instantly set it apart from the towers of steel that now overshadow it. Otto Hermann Kahn was not born into American wealth. He arrived from Germany and rose through the world of finance with a sharp mind and a deep love for the arts. Unlike some titans of the era who built mansions to flaunt their fortune, Kahn built his as a sanctuary for creativity. Constructed between 1914 and 1918, his mansion unfolded as an 80-room palace where elegance and culture lived side by side. Guests approached through a quiet courtyard where fountains reflected the pale stone walls. Once inside, they found halls carved with delicate patterns, marble floors that glowed under soft light, and staircases that seemed crafted more for beauty than utility. But what truly set the home apart was its purpose. Kahn invited musicians, writers, and performers to gather within its walls. The grand music room became the heart of the mansion. Violins, pianos, and opera voices filled the space with sound that drifted through the corridors and out into the courtyard at night. Conversations about art and literature echoed alongside laughter from dinners that stretched until dawn. In a city driven by ambition and wealth, Kahn's mansion offered something rare. It became a refuge for imagination, a place where artists felt valued rather than overshadowed. Over the years, the building changed hands, shifting from private residence to school to cultural institution. Yet its architectural soul remained untouched. Its survival is remarkable, given that most of its contemporaries were demolished to make room for profitable development. Today it stands as one of the last great Gilded Age palaces in Manhattan, a structure that silently tells the story of refined grandeur and artistic devotion. While the Tiffany mansion vanished and many others crumbled under the pressure of modern progress, the Otto Kahn mansion endures, a reminder that not every palace was built solely for wealth. Some were built to preserve beauty itself, and those are the ones time is willing to spare. Asterisk by the early decades of the 20th century, the fate of Manhattan's stone palaces was sealed. The city was transforming at a pace few could have imagined. Automobiles replaced horse carriages, electric signs lit up streets that once glowed only with lanterns, and land values soared to heights that made even the wealthiest families rethink their estates. Skyscrapers rose one after another, each one taller and more efficient than the last, leaving little room for sprawling mansions that demanded entire blocks. Families who once competed through ballroom banquets and marble staircases began moving into luxury apartments, trading opulence for practicality. But although the physical buildings vanished, the legacy of the Gilded Age refused to disappear. The stories of those families and their impossible homes remain woven into the very foundation of Manhattan. Walk down Fifth Avenue and you may not see the limestone walls or the golden ceilings that once defined the avenue. Yet their influence lingers. The Tiffany lamps preserved in museums carry the glow of a mansion long gone. The Otto Kahn mansion still stands as a rare survivor, a testament to an era of imagination and excess. The Vanderbilt gate in Central Park silently marks the spot where the largest home in Manhattan once stood. And the cultural institutions born from Gilded Age fortunes, from art museums to libraries, continue to enrich the city. The palaces themselves may have crumbled, but their echoes remain in the architecture, the culture, and the very identity of New York. The rise and fall of these mansions serve as a reminder that even the greatest displays of wealth are temporary. Yet the ideas they inspire can endure for generations. As modern skyscrapers dominate the skyline, the memory of those vanished palaces invites us to imagine a Manhattan where castles once rose from the streets and where ambition shaped stone into symbols that still capture our imagination.